you are, and we want to say thank you again. Ambassadors, I want to say thank you, and the head of development agents, we want to say thank you very much for joining us from Kigali, Kampala, Addis Ababa, Kinshasa, and Tanzania. We want to say thank you again for joining us today, and we appreciate taking time to join the conversation. I want to say two things before we start, before I welcome our moderator, the SDGs Center for Africa Director, Caroline. I hope she's online. I hope she can join us soon. One thing is our conversation is on the record, and second is Caroline and Dr. Kalibata will jump into the conversation for the first 15 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes open for questions and answer. And so we look forward to the conversation. Caroline, I think the floor is yours here.
Thank you, Yannick, and welcome to this. I think it will be a very exciting discussion. As you know, I'm from the Sustainable Development Goals Center for Africa, and we're always passionate, to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and how they are being implemented. Especially that the topic on food systems actually is directly related to goal number 2, which actually talks about zero hunger. So I'm very excited, today to have, this conversation. And I think one of the first things that I want to ask is that, what does Dr. Kalibata, what do you want to achieve at the end of the Food Summit? What is the vision that you have and the vision that the UN Secretary General has?
We can't hear Dr. Kalibata. I think your microphone is mute. On the screen, on your screen it says still mute. Oh, now it's yes.
Yeah, very good. So I was really just taking a moment to express my appreciation for the invitation to join you all, to join the Kigali Foreign Affairs Council and the SDG Center for Africa. So I'm really excited about the invitation and the opportunity to be able to tell you where things are at and what we are doing within the Food System Summit. Just to step a little bit back, I was appointed in this role at the end of last year, probably just a year, in 2 days, 16th of December. And since then, of course, around March, COVID happened as we were just beginning to take off. But what we've done, I think, is really huge, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. But I'll go back to your question. Your question being, why the Food System Summit? What is the interest the Secretary General had? And it's really purely based on the fact that we are not on track in terms of achieving SDGs. Whether it's the SDG on hunger, like you said earlier, which is referred to as zero hunger, or the other SDGs that are related to food and nutrition, but also the SDGs that are related to how we use our environment to get food and all the interconnectedness. So we now know that how we produce food is also part of the challenge of our world today, contributing significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. But also the waste, the food we produce contributes, I'm told, 8% to greenhouse gas in terms of waste, when it is wasted, contributes to that. So this whole Food System Summit recognizes primarily that we need to come through SDGs, we need to get back on track, but also it recognizes that we need to do so very conscious of the fact that our environment can only take so much of what we do. And we have to be really mindful of that fact. So as a result, we have designed a number of areas that respond to how we produce food, how we access food, how we use food, but also recognizing fully well the vulnerabilities that are within our system that have already been created by the kind of challenges we have. Even before COVID-19, you know that we already had climate change and related issues. So this also recognizes that. So I think the SDG was hoping for the fact that We will galvanize the right level of energy and right level of engagement around SDGs. We will galvanize ambition to come through on SDGs. And we will do so recognizing full well that we need to be aware of our environment and what it can handle and can't handle. So.
That is very interesting. Do you have dates set for the summit?
So what we focused on, maybe before I get to the dates, what we focused on a lot until now, this whole year, we've been focusing on getting what we call the critical instruments of the summit in place so that the summit can be engaging enough. You know, if we are to make it a people's summit like the Secretary General called for, meaning, you know, we need to engage as many people as we can. If we are to make it a solution summit like he called for, we really need to engage. So we have designed a number of instruments of the summit that we will use to be able to deliver on the summit, but beyond as well. So we do have a scientific group that is looking at the science that will be accompanying the summit. We do have action tracks that will be looking at solutions that can scale. So we're interested in solutions, but really solutions that can reach, you know, a number of people at the same time, hundreds, millions of people at the same time, a number of countries at the same time, rather than a few isolated solutions here and there. And this is being done in action tracks. And we do have what we call country level dialogues. So we do believe that food systems are pretty local. In that context, we would like every country to engage in a dialogue that allows them to understand what is challenging at country level, what needs to be addressed, what their peculiar and specific challenges are, and how they will address them, and bring that to the summit as the context, part of the context of that country, of that region as well, to the summit, rather than really take it as one big thing. Yes, we are global. Yes, we are connected globally, but we also need to bring out the peculiarities of each country and each region. And this will happen through the food systems dialogue. So that is in place now. So with these instruments now really in place and taking off a number of other things as well, we hope that the summit can take place next year. We are looking at the week of 19th of July as the pre-summit week in Italy, in partnership with the government of Italy, and the summit to take place in New York alongside the UN General Assembly. So that's in terms of, yeah, I think that's the answer to your question.
Thank you. And what are some of the key highlights? Like, for example, I mean, you know, we've had COVID. I mean, it has really impacted, you know, life in many ways, especially when it comes to food production. What are some of the things that, you know, you are really sort of expecting countries to really be able to, you know, engage, debate, maybe new innovations, new ways of doing things? What are your expectations with regard to that?
So we've mapped out the objectives of the summit as being in 5 areas. The first objective will be focusing on hunger and access to nutritious food. And that's the area that focuses on hunger, on nutrition, and nutrition-related issues. And that area is being broken down into a number of places to look at what would be solutions for those different places. Then the second one would be looking at consumption and consumer behavior and waste. And that area recognizes very well that we all eat 3 times a day, or make the choice to eat 3 times a day. And how we eat and how we look at food, how we consume food impacts our food systems. And being able to reach consumers and engage around consumer behavior is extremely important. But also being able to engage waste, like I told you, we waste a lot of food, is extremely important. So that area will look at consumption, but it also look at how consumption impacts health as well. We have another area which looks at production and how production impacts the environment, and we are calling it nature positive production. And that is really looking at the role of the agricultural landscape and the food production landscape, its contribution to climate change and its contribution to emissions, like I said earlier, and looking at how we can reduce that, including rehabilitate what is already lost. So we are also looking at rehabilitation of degraded ecosystems and how we impact biodiversity as well. The fourth part looks at equitable livelihoods, recognizing fully well that we, as a continent, for example, in Africa, we already had a challenge of employment, but it's not Africa alone. Globally, we do have these challenges, but also COVID-19 has shown that irrespective of anywhere, wherever you speak about in the world, there are people that are living, you know, marginally and have become vulnerable as a result. So looking at how we improve livelihoods is going to be important. And then the last one is resilience to shocks. And again, like I said, even before climate change, before COVID, there was need to think through how we strengthen resilience. And this is one of the areas that would be a focus of the summit. So those are the objectives. In terms of how we work through them, the action tracks will focus on working with countries to think through solutions that can work for different landscapes, different countries, because action tracks are made of technical institutions, but also countries as well. We do have countries that have signed up to be members of action tracks, and just to be able to provide rich conversation. But so is private sector. Private sector is also engaged in action tracks, and civil society. So we are hoping that with those type of engagements, we can find solutions to each of those problems I've talked about or objectives I've talked about. Now, we do have what we call levers of change, and levers of change are areas that cut across. For example, financing. We think through a lot about how do we fund all this? You know, what are going to be the sources of funding, whether we are dealing with hunger or malnutrition or dealing with net zero production. How do we fund all these things? So there's a group and a team that is charged with thinking through this. Some other cross-cutting issues are issues like youth and women, to ensure that across all these areas we think through the implication. And another cross-cutting issue thought through is the political engagement. What type of political engagement do we want to get around transformative policy frameworks that could make a whole lot of difference in a given objective or under a given objective? So those are the type of things we are thinking through, in addition to the dialogues that I told you, that really create the type of solutions they want to put on the table, and then we can debate them. These things will go, like I said earlier, there's a scientific group that looks at all these things and how they come together, and also looks at empirical data that really provides a sense of how we should take a certain direction as opposed to another, looks at the trade-offs that we have to do to be thinking through as we take on some of these options that we need to take on as we go forward. So I hope I've answered your question, but in a nutshell, those are some of the things we're looking at.
Yes, I think you've been very elaborate, and I want to really manage my time very well. So I'm going to open the floor for discussions from the other panelists, those who have questions for you, and those that maybe want to dig in a little bit deeper, and get to know maybe some of the more detailed information, maybe also how they can also participate, but also just how to really be involved in this conference, because this is a conference that is very important, and at a time when the world has been hit by a pandemic, but we are still hopeful, especially that now there are vaccines that are on the market. So at this stage, I want to